services are defined by the concept of giving workers the flexibility to work wherever they want, whenever they want. Now, Liam holds an undergrad and graduate degree in sociology from McGill University, and he lives in Canada but travels 3 to 6 months out of the year due to his ability to work whenever and wherever he likes. Liam is going to be joined in conversation with our own amazing Theda Masters, who's a talent advocate with Power to Fly. Theda is an experienced HR professional who's passionate about helping others to take a step closer to their career goals. She's a budding entrepreneur, the founder of Sweet AD's Signs, and Luxury Intimates and Cosmetics. Theda is also a self-published author where she writes and creates low-content books such as children's activity books, journals for all ages, coloring books for all ages, puzzle books for all ages, and many more. Theda can be found spending time with her family or working on a design or book, and is also known to be a nature lover. Theda, I am really excited to turn the stage over to you and Liam. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Meg. Thank you so much for that beautiful introductions. We love it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Liam, welcome to the summit.
Thank you for having me, Theda. Really excited to be here. And Meg, fantastic introduction. You have really read out my PR1 sheet in probably, I would say, I've done this about 11 times over the last week, and that was by far the best one that I've currently read or that I've currently heard.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liam, for joining us once more. We are looking forward to what you have to share about transitioning to, a hybrid work model. So first, your work about the benefits of remote and hybrid work is really prolific, right? And you started advocating for these models pre-pandemic. Can you tell us why remote and hybrid work can be so powerful for a company's success in today's economy?
Yeah, I was doing it before it was cool. I've almost done it for 20 years, which has been kind of crazy seeing the last 2.5 years. February of 2020, 4% of the US workforce was working remotely. By March, it was 45% of the US workforce. It's the biggest transition since the Industrial Revolution, but the Industrial Revolution took 80 years and we did that in March. So just to kind of recognize the transition that's currently occurred, we're completely rewriting the book on how to be able to do work. And I think it's really interesting to see where we're at right now, because the last 20 years, the last 2.5 years, more stuff's happened then than the last 20 years of remote work. And I actually think that in the next 2 years, there's going to be more that's happening inside of remote and hybrid work than in the last 2 previous years, because now we're moving from work from home to true remote work. So we were originally in the office, then we were working from an office, now we're working from home. Those are both not remote work. Those are both places, right? So remote work is really where you're able to take your work with you. And you could work inside of an office, you could work from home, you could work from a co-working space, you could work from beaches in Jamaica, as an example, which is a place that I really like, and I know that you like too. So you can work wherever you want, whenever you want. And I think that that's the real excitement that I'm seeing over the next couple of years, where people are really, for the first time ever, are going to be able to get a taste of true remote work, which they currently have not been experiencing the last 2.5 years of the pandemic.
Totally agree. And it's more even more fulfilling knowing you have that sort of flexibility to actually work from anywhere and not just from home. Thank you so much for sharing that. So you stated in previous communications that, the office is dead. Why do you think that is? And how long do you think the transition from office to hybrid will actually take place?
So the data right now is approximately 60% of the US workforce is going to a hybrid model, with another 20% going back to the office and another 20% saying we're going to stay remote forever. That's a really interesting statistic. And I think the one that's the most important is hybrid, to be able to figure out, well, is this really the end point for everyone? Or is this another waiting room for people to really kind of make up their decision as to whether or not they want to go completely remote or if they want to go back to the office? So I lovingly call everyone that switched to remote work during the pandemic panickers, because it really was a panic. No one really knew what to do. It was like emergency remote work. And so I think we're still experiencing that today. And when I talk about the office being dead, I think we're going to go through a transition state that we're currently in right now, where we're going to see that office environment not necessarily ever go back to what it was before. There's a data point that I see up here in Canada, which is approximately 30% of corporate leases are empty. And that's a massive increase from, I think, approximately 10% it was before the pandemic. Now, we're not really recognizing the full extent of that economic impact, but I think what you're probably going to see in the future is a lot of hybrid spaces that are going to pop up. To our point that we're talking about today, we're going to see a lot of people that maybe come in one day a week, as an example. A lot of those places are going to transition from like brick and mortar offices to co-working spaces, or even hubs of co-working spaces all over the world. So the office is dead, yes, but it's been reborn as a new animal, which is going to be a lot more flexible for everyone.
Beautiful. And that's wonderful to hear. What are the key considerations an organization needs to make before transitioning permanently to a hybrid model?
So I think there's a couple things that you need to take into consideration. The first one, and I tell every single person when they're going to go either hybrid or remote, is recognize that you have your processes in place. So most successful remote teams pre-pandemic have a methodology that we really refer to as asynchronous management, the ability to be able to manage people without interacting with them face to face. So if you think that true remote work is doing 8-hour Zoom calls every day, that's not actually true remote work. There is a completely separate methodology built way before the pandemic that shows that individuals should actually minimize the amount of time that they spend communicating synchronously with team members so that they can spend more time solving really hard, difficult problems. And a core tenet of that is having your processes in place. So inside of all of the companies that I am involved in, I do not own any position inside of that organization. I currently operate the position inside of that organization. So I'm not the CMO of the company. I currently operate the position of CMO. And at any point tomorrow, as an example, if I got hit by a bus, I could delegate all of those responsibilities and someone else could take over that job for me. If you create an organization that has that type of diligence in terms of your operational procedures, then you can scale that organization very, very quickly, because human beings cease to become the management layer inside of these organizations, but the platform actually becomes the manager, which is a lot more successful for people that are distributed all across planet Earth. It gives access to people that wouldn't have really been able to access the jobs that we currently enjoy in, North America, as an example. It's giving so many more people opportunities to access those jobs because they can be trained by the processes and the platform and not necessarily the individual managers. Another big one that I think is really important to be able to take into consideration is the concept of autonomy, the ability to be able to not ask someone what to do, but tell them what you did. So that's the internal, when anyone works with me, I have a document, which is Liam and his weird little quirks. And there are 9 truths about me that are very, I wouldn't necessarily want to admit them to myself, to be completely honest with you. But I reached out to 3 of my closest friends and I said, hey, if you were going to work for me, or if someone else was going to work for me, what things would you warn them about before you go into that work relationship with maybe a good friend of yours? And so they wrote out those truths. I put that into a document. And at the bottom of that document, I say, don't ask me what to do. Tell me what you did. So autonomy, the ability to be able to take individual action and achieve your own goals, focus on your own targets and being able to reach them the way that you want to reach them is absolutely critical towards remote work. The last one that I think is really important that a lot of people don't necessarily take into consideration that much, and you actually touched on it in the introduction a little bit, is always assume positive intent. So when you're communicating asynchronously, which most remote teams do, there can be a lot of interpretation inside of the messages that are sent inside of asynchronous remote organizations. Did Theta actually like the message that I sent? Did she like that I mentioned beaches? Or maybe she had a horrible time at beaches and, it was a horrible experience for her, and that is now angering you. Always assume positive intent in any form of communication. And this is generally going to relieve a lot of serious HR problems down the road.
Totally agree. Totally agree. We're going to pause real quick just to check what's happening in the chat. Jessica asked, how should you conduct yourself as the potential employee in a remote interview? Resume gap explanation is one such question they have as well.
So I think inside of remote teams, and particularly the ones that were built before the pandemic, we really focus on proof of work and not necessarily, the gaps that you had inside of your resume. So if you're approaching a tech company or a startup, which is a big segment of the remote work world right now, a lot of those companies, I would probably just sit down and say, hey, I tried something. Maybe I tried some type of entrepreneurial venture. It failed completely. And do you want me to explain that failure to you in great detail? That's really great for me and refreshing, because when you think about a job candidate, there are, in my opinion, A candidates and B candidates. A candidates are, I have 7 other job offers. Why should I work for you? And then B candidates are, please let me have this job. I really, really need it. You want to be able to be in the A camp and not the B camp. It's kind of like a little bit of, FOMO for everyone, fear of missing out. You want to be that person that the employer pursues as well. And that really boils down to me it really boils down to honesty, to be completely honest with you. If you just explain, hey, I tried this business, it completely failed, or man, I couldn't find a job for 6 months. It was COVID. It was very, very difficult. And here's how I got through that problem. That's probably going to actually end up being a lot more positive than if you just make something up.
Definitely. Transparency is key. Another question, how can we rationalize remote first work anywhere when there is not a financial incentive? The person's concern, is how can they help leadership understand that this cost does not mean that, all employees need to be back at the office?
Yeah. So, this is a big one. Part of the question there is, my organization is locked into an expensive lease. So this is the classic sunk cost fallacy. Well, I have this $20 million lease over the next 10 years. Yes, but that is now redundant. You made a mistake and you shouldn't have done that. And what's going to make this what's going to right this situation? Is it continuing to stick your head in the sand and not actually recognize that you need a much more flexible work schedule? Or is it to force everyone back to the office that they don't want to go to, and all of those A players that I mentioned before will leave? Because we're seeing a massive transition. Another big crazy statistic in March of 2020, 75% of people that make more than $100,000 per year were working remotely. So the people that are more in that A category, the people that have options in terms of their jobs, those are the ones that are saying, well, listen, it's either remote or nothing, or it's hybrid or nothing, or I just want to be able to come into the office 1 day a week. And if you're not really willing to let me do that, then I'm going to go find somewhere else to work. And you might think that losing that 20% of your workforce is not that big of a deal. But unfortunately, a lot of people, if you Google the Pareto principle, usually 20% of workers result in 80% of the work done. And it's those A players that you want to retain, because those are the ones that are really leading the organization.
Great, great. And that sort of leads us into, our next question. Like, what do you say, or what do you think what roadblocks do you think can reasonably expected as a company goes hybrid? How can these be dealt with?
Biggest problem with hybrid teams, and to be completely honest with you, I'm very scared about the amount of companies that are going hybrid right now. I think that without proper training and understanding of how to execute on it properly, there's a lot of pitfalls inside of hybrid work, less so with in-office and with remote. But it really circles around this one critical issue, which is distance bias. So, and I love that I'm on the Power to Fly event, because I think that this is a really important one to reinforce. Generally, if I sat in a boardroom and I said to myself, whose ideas are going to get adopted, without actually hearing what anyone is saying, generally, it is going to be the 6'2" man that looks like Captain America. That's incredibly charismatic and is able to pull everyone in to that workflow. And unfortunately, I call this also charisma bias, which is the ability to be able to communicate synchronously is a really important asset. But unfortunately, does Captain America actually have better ideas than anyone else? The vast majority of the time, he doesn't. The vast majority of the time, actually, he has worse ideas than everyone else, but he could just deliver that information more effectively. So you need to be able to actually remove that bias from an organization. And so when you have either a video call or an in-office, discussion, it's really important to be able to think about, let's really focus on the ideas and not necessarily the person, the package around it. The other side of it is distance bias, which is that same manager or decision maker generally has a bias towards decisions being adopted the closer that employee is to that manager or decision maker. So people that go to the office end up having their decisions adopted more often, or their ideas adopted more often, than people that are remote. And unfortunately, this is something that the vast majority of managers don't really recognize, and they have to control for it, because the remote employees really feel like second-class workers. They're saying to themselves, well, my ideas aren't getting adopted, or I thought we were going to do option A, but then the next morning I wake up and I find out that we're doing option B because people were having a side discussion after the real conversation ended. And those are really detrimental towards company culture. And those people are either going to move into the office because that's the only way that they can get their ideas adopted, which they don't want to do, or they're going to quit.
Indeed. And tell us, we're interested to know more about the Running Remote conference. Tell us a little bit more about that, and what the audience might take away from attending such a conference.
Sure. So first, I'd like to just really state who it isn't for. It's not for employees, and it's not for individual stakeholders. It's for founders and operators of remote and hybrid teams that want to be able to really scale that process. So if you want to get to 100 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, this is absolutely the conference for you if you want to do it remotely. We learn strategies about how to build how to get ahead of remote inside of your organization, how to scale company culture remotely. A lot of the things we're probably covering in this event right now, but we're going to do it in person, and we're going to do it May 17th and 18th in Montreal, Canada.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Moving to the chat, Cassie asks, I currently work for a large nonprofit that has decided to go hybrid and hired my role as a result. I'm 2 months in, and it's clear that they have a long way to go. Way too many ineffective meetings, no documentation and processes whatsoever. Her question is, if your leadership team is on board, but looking for direction, but they're not wholly unaware how much work there is to be done, where do they even start?
First thing that they do is they go to this Power to Fly event right now. And then the very next thing that they should do is go to the Running Remote conference. somewhat kidding there, but actually it would probably be super valuable for them to do it if they're serious about it. But I suggest actually starting at one critical piece, which is within the first 3 months that anyone works for me, I have them write one simple document, which is how to do my job. So I would suggest every single person inside of the organization write down, it's less than 5 pages. You can link out to other processes and systems and procedures, but it's got to be under 5 pages, how to do my job. And then in analyzing that, you can actually figure out all of the different things that you need to solve for. So how do I actually, do payroll as an example? Bring me through Bamboo HR. What's the process connected to it? Who can I delegate this process to? And then in doing that, you create what I call making sure that instructions are not easy to understand, but impossible to misunderstand. So the very next thing that you do is you take that document and you bring it to other team members and you say, hey, this is how I do my job. Does this make sense to you? Do you know how to do my job? You send it to other people, and preferably actually people that are not in the same department as you. So if you're in customer support, send it to like a computer engineer, and then someone that's completely not connected to what you usually do. And if they know how to do it, then you are so much further ahead than I would probably say 90% of organizations that stand right now. And Casey, I'm assuming you're probably like a head of remote or something like that. I would definitely look at some of the work that Darren Murph is doing from GitLab. I don't know if he's at this event as well, but he was the first ever head of remote, and he speaks a lot and writes a lot about this particular subject, particularly transitioning people to a remote and hybrid model as a head of remote.
Great. We are almost at time, but before we close things off, Liam, is there anything you would like to share, anything you'd like to make mention of? If anyone needs more information regarding the conference and anything, is there information that you want to provide?
Sure. How much time do we have left? Only a couple minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have about 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Oh, perfect.
That's good enough.
Let's play a competition here, and you can probably post this for us. Whoever wants a free ticket to the Running Remote conference, explain why, and best comment will end up getting a free ticket to the Running Remote conference. Specifically taking into consideration, someone like Casey would be a great candidate to be able to come to the conference. But if you're a direct employee that's not necessarily looking at how to build a remote team or build through those processes, it's probably not the right spot for you. Outside of that, I would say, to me, and again, I'm kind of speaking to the choir here, or preaching to the choir, because you're all here at an event like this, but remote work isn't just a nice to have anymore. It's something that everyone is going to have to adopt. It's table stakes now inside of almost every company on planet Earth. And there's a lot of issues that are going to be coming up over the next year or two as we move to hybrid, and then possibly move from hybrid to remote or back to the office. So during that entire time, it's really important to be able to take into consideration, you need to learn these systems, these processes. You need to learn how to manage remote teams effectively, because if you can't do it, then you're simply going to recreate the office. And I think that's actually the worst at home. And I think that that's the worst option that we can possibly take. We don't want to actually have just a recreation of the office at home. We want to be able to get back to true remote work, which is the stuff that I've been enjoying over the last 20 years.
Indeed. Christopher asks, I can imagine creating how to do my job, doc, would make people nervous and feel replaceable. How would one kick off that culture?
Great point, Christopher. So this is what I call holding sacred knowledge. And there are things that everyone does inside of the organization that make them feel critical to the organization, non-replaceable, right? And the issue that produces is it also produces an environment where your career is really being held back. The theoretical underpinnings for remote work, if you had to choose one book on that subject, it would be by my friend Cal Newport, a book titled Deep Work. So the more people that you can optimize towards deep work, which is having everything at your disposal to be able to solve really hard problems inside of an organization, the faster your organization will move. Well, unfortunately, if you are the owner of a position, but you don't currently operate that position, which is, again, a little bit of a different issue there, then there's no way for you to actually evolve your career and figure out how to solve deeper and more interesting problems. And hopefully in your job, you're really passionate about solving new and different problems. I know that that's how I like to operate inside of my own personal career. So it's keeping people from recognizing that, hey, it's not so much about where you're at right now. It's about trying to make sure that we can move you forward. And the other thing inside of this document that we find time and time again is about half of this document can be automated. So a lot of people that are actually doing things, it's like, oh, well, I move the name from this spreadsheet to this spreadsheet 4 hours a day. Well, could we just build a piece of software to solve that for you? Now you have 4 more hours during your day and you can do something else that's a lot more fun.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And we actually have some comments for your giveaway.
Oh, perfect.
Yahira says, I had not heard of the Running Remote conference, but I am in a company that is considering getting rid of their building. If we do that, we really need to be prepared. And I would love to learn more about what it would take and how we would get there. That's one.
That sounds
good. We also have Courtney. He says, I work in a nonprofit that has struggled with remote work. It still feels like the office is best and that the remote aspect is begrudgingly accepted. I'm only IT person in this org, and I have the chance to move some of our older servers to the cloud. And I want to use this opportunity to set up a truly remote experience for my coworkers who can't come into the office.
We've got one more, and then
Yep.
Theta, you get to decide.
Yeah. Lynn says, I work for a new startup company where no one has ever worked remote minus during stay. Let me start over. I work for a new startup company where no one has ever worked remote minus during stay-at-home orders. And now we are all working remote exclusively. I would love to know more information on running the remote conference, please.
So
right.
Courtney, Yahira, hopefully I pronounced that, and Lynn, Theta, who is the winner?
All right. I would say Courtney, mainly because he's looking forward towards next step for building that truly remote team. I hope I did a great pick.
Courtney, you just won a $1,000 ticket to the Running Remote conference. Just go to youtube.com/running remote. That's our YouTube channel. Reach out to me there and I will make sure that you get set up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Liam. And thank you for this wonderful conversation. Great comments in the chat. Great questions. Thank you so much once more for joining us. You do enjoy the rest of your day. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.